Hello everyone, welcome to Minds and Machines, the panel discussion that we are hosting today at Gazette House. It is dedicated to two exhibitions that we currently have in view. On these two floors, we have a solo exhibition of Jake Elwes, Data Glitch Utopia, where Jake brings together a body of work, demystifying, opening up, and playing around artificial intelligence. Jake also commissioned a new iteration of his most notable work, Dizzy Show, to the Victoria and Albert Museum. And this exhibition coincides with the display of that new iteration at the Photography Center at the V&A. And we're very excited to welcome Jake Elwes himself and Catherine Troiano, Victoria and Albert Museum Photography Curator. I'm just going to briefly introduce the speakers so we can move on to the discussion. So Jake Elwes is a new media artist that works with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and their work was exhibited worldwide in places such as the DSL Collection in London, ZKM in Germany, Youth Museum in China, Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and many other places. And Catherine Troiano is, as I mentioned, Curator of Photography in Victoria and Albert Museum, and she previously was the first curator of National Collection of Photography in the National Trust. And she is part of the team which brought together the newly opened Photography Center at the Victoria and Albert Museum. The center is the largest space in the UK which showcases a permanent collection of photography. So we're really looking forward to learn more about this, about Jake's work, about how you guys work together. And then we'll move on to the second project, what we host in the project space in the basement. So this is a UK premiere of the work by a Hangzhou-based artist, Chen Lan. The work is called Always a Distrust, and it was co-commissioned by VIVE Arts and K11 Foundation Hong Kong. It was also shown in X Museum in Hong Kong. It's a part of the collection of X Museum. And we are so proud and honored to do this exhibition together with VIVE Arts. And we are welcoming Samantha King today, who is head of program of VIVE Arts. In conversation with Sam will be Helen Ho, a manager of DSL Collection. So DSL Collection is one of the most known and notable collections of Chinese contemporary art in the world, and also very well known for exploring digital tools to educate and share awareness about the collection itself, about the artist, and they have Chen Zhan's works in the collection. So we're just going to focus on these two projects first, and then hopefully we'll have a very insightful joint discussion about the digital infrastructure to support digital art, and how these different experiences from these different point of views contribute to building digital art ecosystem. It is super important to us because we at Gazelle Art House has been dedicated to show digital art for some time now, specifically through Gazellio, which is digital art program, and it comprises of digital art residency, NFT drops, and project space exhibitions, and VR library. So that's it. That's me and introduction. I'm just going to show a few install shots of both projects, but obviously you're very welcome to explore it at the gallery. This is a wonderful work by Jake Elwes. And then here we go to the project space exhibition by Chen Zhan and the work Always a Distrust. It has a VR element, so please everyone go and experience that. And I am probably gonna pass on to Jake.
Yeah, sure.
To speak. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, what's the best thing? So shall I speak a bit about the project and then we go into conversation a bit, or we could kind of start off together? I don't know what the best thing is. Were you thinking that So a few minutes
Yeah,
each.
so each of you is going to introduce a little bit,
Okay,
and then
cool.
we're going to...
All right, well, I'll briefly speak on this project and kind of explain a little bit about where it came from and what I'm trying to do with it. So, incredibly exciting. We've got the ZZ show on display at the moment for nearly a year. And it's a multi-channel video installation. So when you walk into the room, you are surrounded by a cast of 10 deepfake virtual drag performers who all perform to you in sync. So it's quite strange actually seeing bodies do identical movement. This is kind of showing in a way the conceit of the artificial intelligence. So these are all constructed bodies, trained on real people, but constructed using AI. So when you walk into this space, you get to see all of these faces perform to you David Bowie songs and Shirley Bassey songs, Prince songs. So this is the space, and it's been so wonderful. Like the last few weeks I've been in, and there have been like little kids dancing in front of. Have you seen that as well, Catherine? It's been so cute. It was like a 5-year-old girl when I was there last week who was trying to kind of duplicate the movements of all the drag performers, which was so cute. So I guess there's quite a lot to this project to unpack in a way, because it's a project that I've been working on for the last 4 or so years, but I'll do my best to do it in the couple of minutes that I have. But I might show you a little bit of moving footage of it, because it kind of gives you a bit of a sense of the project. So here is... And then it kind of breaks into these moments where they all kind of do different movement in the silences in between. So what you were just watching was a drag queen called Cara Mel, who's an amazing drag artist who was lip-syncing to Beyonce. And we track her movement, and then we're able to apply it to Lily Snatch Dragon and the other performers. And now we have Baby Lane, Dark Demure, and me, the drag queen, and they're about to start performing a David Bowie song, 5 years. So definitely go and see it in the space. I'm going to actually skip past this one now. Sorry, wait one sec. I'm trying to remember what order these slides are in. Here we go. That's what I want to get to. So this is kind of how we build these deep fake drag performers. The idea is that we are creating these constructions. We're creating these deep fakes. So deep fakes in themselves as a technology are being debated a lot at the moment. So they're quite problematic. They can be used for quite problematic things like perpetuating fake news and for deep fake pornography and really kind of dark, insidious purposes. So for us, in a way, this project was like, how do we take this quite oppressive technology and celebrate it and kind of uplift our queer community with it, rather than what tends to happen with AI, which is that it's often trained on, very normative identities and tends to reinforce kind of societal biases towards more oppressed communities, such as the queer community. That's kind of where this project started from. There's a piece here, you can see over there, called Queering the Dataset. That was a piece from 2019, where I injected 1,000 images of drag kings and queens and things and monsters and kind of images of gender fluidity, and drag as a way, like the ultimate form of gender nonconformity, to kind of inject that into a facial recognition system and see how it breaks down that system, right? So then kind of, I think over the last few years, we had lockdown. I was kind of starting to think, how do we start to work with performers? A lot of our venues were shut, so we kind of created this virtual show. And then a couple of years later, we were able to take it to the V&A and have a whole massive installation of it. So you can see in this diagram here, this is kind of a bit of the machine learning in a way. And I like this whole kind of trying to open up the black box of how AI is working. But effectively, to create these deep fakes, we filmed someone walking around a room, maybe, for like 3 minutes. That's 7,000 photographs of that drag performer. And those each become images in our data set, right? And we turn those images into skeletons and silhouettes. It kind of tracks the body, if you like. And then the AI comes in, and it has to try and make the original image on the left, but without seeing that image, only seeing the skeleton, right? So this is kind of over the course of a few days. It will get better and better until, sort of around here, it starts to create a hyper-realistic image of Lily Snatchdragon that's almost indifferentiable from the original image. At that point, we can put in anyone's new movement, and anyone can perform as Lily Snatchdragon. But this then became a big issue for us. Now that anyone can perform as Lily, do we want anyone to perform as Lily? That feels quite problematic in a way. So what we did was we wanted to make sure that only people within our community could reanimate the bodies within this project. So we kind of kept it as a really closed project, and we also made sure that everyone knew how their data was going to be used. They were paid every time their data gets used. Really trying to think through data ethics, which I think is one of the biggest questions at the moment with AI. So I think that's probably where I'm going to stop. There's a couple of other videos, but I might not show them all now. I'm trying to remember how long they all are. This is quite fun. I might just show you this. This is one of my favourite moments in the project. So this is an example of when the AI fails, right? And for me, there's real poetry in AI failing. Because I think for me as an artist, I don't have to make the AI work and function. And actually, when it breaks down and fails, it often shows problems in how the system was made. Often it shows, social bias with the system. It shows the limitations of this software. This is an example of when we created our own system. We created our own data set of drag performers. But we never filmed any of our performers drop into the splits, right? Partly because a lot of them aren't capable of actually doing the splits. But this meant that that was an AI bias, that existed outside of what the AI knew performers looked like. So when we get these performers to try and drop into the splits, which Cara Mel did in her movement, it doesn't know what to do. It kind of fails and breaks down. So you can see here, it's Lily Snatchdragon trying to do the splits as a deepfake, and Luke's like Mahatma Gandhi, TT Bang, but you can see, I think in a second, it completely disintegrates. That's sister. And so I think on a very micro scale, this is talking about AI bias. So if a facial recognition system can't recognize, trans people of color or something like that, or some data point exists outside what you've given it, you've trained it on, outside its whole world view, then it kind of fails and it breaks down, right? So this is kind of a fun, playful way of visualizing that and exploring it. So the last thing I'm going to quickly mention is this is a project that's also been ongoing for a while. It's called Zizi and Me. And this project is about really taking to stage, rather than working with video, really working on stage with real life performers, where we have an AI deepfake clone of a drag queen, and then her real life self. And they perform together on stage. So this is called Zizi and Me. And if anyone is around on Friday night, so 3 days' time, the V&A are doing a late, where we're actually going to be flooding the V&A with drag. So do come, 7 till 10, just show up, you don't have to book for it. And we're going to be showcasing a couple of these performances as well. So, thank you.
Okay. We also showed this in Me, the first
Yeah, we had the first performance downstairs actually, it was amazing.
It was
we had
really
projected across the basement and
Pandemic summer.
Summer, I know.
Really thank you so much. Okay, so just moving on to Catherine, and it's just so exciting to hear about the photography center. I hope everyone already been, or if not, please go. It's an incredible space, and please share about this. And I hope you'll share about your experience working together as well. That would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if you haven't been, I strongly encourage you to visit the newly completed photography centre that's located just on the first floor of the V&A. If you were familiar with where the photography galleries have been so far, it's there. The photography centre was a 2-phase project, the first phase of which opened in 2018 and the second and final phase of which opened just on the 25th of May. So it's brand new, it's very exciting. and Jake's work is in the Digital Gallery, or Room 99. Jake's commission was supported by the Manitou Fund, and this gallery is a really exciting space for us. This is an installation shot, as you've seen before. It's located really at the heart of the photography centre, so it's kind of giving a position on how we're thinking about photography as it's expanding in the sphere of contemporary practice. So just to situate the ZZ show in the kind of broader context of the photography centre, this is one of the installation shots of one of the two galleries which opened in 2018 as the first phase of the photography centre. It's dedicated to showing our permanent collection. As Tina said, the photography centre, it's over 1,000 square metres. It's a suite of 7 gallery spaces. It's the largest space dedicated to permanent photography at any institution in the UK. This is half of the space dedicated to showing photography 1840s to now, which is where we think about histories of photography and pull them into a contemporary context from our permanent collection. The inaugural display in these spaces is on the theme of energy.
It's also the theme of Friday.
It's also the theme of our Friday Late, exactly. And as Jake said, free, lots of, I think there are over 14 things.
Yeah, they got like 14 performances and activations. It's really quite amazing.
Full programme. This is the same gallery, and this you can see just through the windows at the end of that door, the kind of glow of the screens of Jake's work. And this is quite intentional, so I'll come back to this in a minute. So you move through these spaces into the digital gallery, into a library. It's a room dedicated to photography and the book, and visibly houses part of the Royal Photographic Society library. The Royal Photographic Society collection was transferred to the V&A in 2017 by the Science Museum Group, and it includes a library of books that requires over 2 miles worth of shelving. So some of it is here, it's all accessible, it's a functioning library, you can view things in the NAL. Some more installation. You can see that once you move into these spaces, there's this kind of spectacular enfilade of arches. You can see down through, you're really being pulled through the space. And each space does something quite discrete. So from the library, you move into the contemporary spaces. They're called Photography Now, and it's where we think through contemporary photography. So we will be showing digital practice in these spaces as well, because digital practice, we're not thinking about it in a way that silos it only to the digital gallery. But we are thinking very hard about, as we would with any other type of work, what kind of work is appropriate for what kind of setting. So not everything needs to be in a whole room installation. And some things really benefit from that, and some things actually will work really well in dialogue with other artists' work in a group setting. And then finally, there's a room dedicated to the history of cameras, and there's a walk-in camera obscura, which functions as so. So that's the kind of experience as you move through the photography centre, and you'll notice that the digital gallery is between the 1840s to now galleries in the library. It's quite interesting and important, that kind of positioning. There were various different reasons for it, but one of the things that it means is that you don't move through this chronological experience of the centre, and actually you're moving from having seen potentially works from the 19th century straight into a digital gallery. You have that view down, you have that glow of the screens pulling you into the digital space, and it's helping you to think and make connections between things that might feel quite disparate, so AI digital work and 19th century photographs. But actually we think there's lots of really rich kind of connection and dialogue to be had in this way across the collection. It's space that's dedicated to the collection, and so we're really invested in making these connections and having these conversations between different aspects of histories of photography. This space is where we'd like to be really ambitious in how we think about what photography is, what contemporary photography is, what it can be. And Jake and my colleague Marta Weiss, who was the lead curator for the Photography Centre project, they gave an interview on Radio 4 and kept getting asked, but is it photography? Is it photography? And it's interesting to me that people really fixate on this question because it's photographic. And I'm not entirely convinced that by putting these limitations on what we think of in, as an artistic medium, as this medium or that medium, or photography or not photography, I don't think that we gain anything from that. And I think we've learned from, histories of practice that actually thinking expansively about artwork and about cultural production, about creativity is good, and it's what allows us to kind of move through different ways of working and experience different kinds of cultural experience. So as we've mentioned, this was a commission. It's the commission was funded, supported by the Manitou Fund, and it pulled the ZZ project, the ZZ show, which was a project that existed, as Jake said, online, into a brick and mortar space. So it expanded and translated this project into a brick and mortar space, which, as an institution with a significant amount of gallery space, we're obviously thinking about how that makes sense and how it makes sense to our visitors. It was an interesting commission, actually, because often the work we commission is brand new, and the ZZ show existed already, which made it interesting and exciting in a different, you know, it made us think a lot more, I think, about how it's connecting to our audiences rather than the like, you know, the bones of what the work is, because we had a sense of what that would be because the project was pre-existing.
I think Duncan came to see it. Well, he saw me do a talk in COVID at the Photographers Gallery, the head of the department.
Duncan's the head of photography.
And I think he was kind of like, I want that. But can we work out how to actually make it physical? Because it's been built in COVID. But I think this is also like, I guess it's like a collaborative, ongoing project as well. So it's a living project. So it's a collaboration. It's kind of a new iteration of it. Like, we were able to massively expand the cast, for instance, and really diversify who's there and some of the new movement for it. So yeah, kind of nicely evolved.
And collaboration is quite an important point. When we work with contemporary artists, we're thinking a lot about collaborative process. We don't often have these very strict frameworks around how commissions should go, or content, or things like that. And we, as a museum, really would like to be able to facilitate contemporary artists who are already working in interesting direction. We want to be able to support that practice evolve and grow. And it's been really joyous to see how our visitors are interacting with the work. The gallery, it was hard to know how people would move through the gallery before we installed it, partly because it's quite new. It's certainly new for the Photography Centre. A version of Gallery 99 as a digital space opened in 2018, but it was very different and was refurbished with the second phase of the project. The V&A itself does have a very productive digital design and digital art team who have been collecting digital work since, for a number of decades already. But I think it's not what people expect to see at the V&A, and I think it's certainly not what people expect to see walking out of galleries 100 and 101, which include historic works. And people are really stopping, and they're watching the work, and they're trying to figure out what it is, because when you walk in, unless you know already that it's a project about deepfakes, it's not immediately clear to you that the performers are not on. It's not immediately clear that they are deepfakes
until they dissolve into the floor.
Until they start dissolving. and so it's been, for us certainly, it's been a fantastic experience, both working with Jake and seeing the project come to life in the space, and really be brought to life by our visitors, who are always the other half of all the projects that we do.
Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much. That's such an insightful story. I was wondering if, given that there is a digital art department, is there any distinction between the two, or do you think it's beneficial for both to work together, or is it how does it work?
So we sit in. So I'm one of the photography curators, but I have a specialism around contemporary digital practices. So I sit within the photography team. Yeah. There is a digital design team. They have curators of digital design and curators of digital art, and they sit in a separate team. They have their own section. We work quite closely together. And we have a lot of overlap. So increasingly we have these meetings where we talk about artists we're interested in or work we're thinking about acquiring, and our lists have many overlaps, because the boundaries between what is photography and what is digital practice and what is art, these boundaries are so fluid and they're fuzzy, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. So we really want to lean into that, and we don't necessarily need to uphold medial segregation in the way that our our departmental structure necessitates, just because of how we sit and how our titles work. But we're collaborating actually on the next few installations, and in the digital gallery we're working very closely together on those projects. So there's certainly a lot of overlap, and it's the digital team that kind of spearhead a lot of the institutional infrastructure around digital collecting, digital conservation, all of that kind of practical thinking around storage and future proofing and access. That's really being spearheaded by Corinna Gardner and her team. So we're working with them, but happily grateful that work is being championed.
Thank you. No, this is just a beautiful installation. Again, encouraging everyone to go see it live, because that's just incredible experience.
Yeah, come see it on Friday if you can.
So I'd like to move on to the other project, and then we hopefully will be back to discussing everything all together. Cool.
我觉得大多数艺术家的状态，其实他始终还是非常独立的。对我来说，我可能改变并不是很大，因为我平时也基本上待在家里。但我觉得可能很大的改变在于情感，包括各种我们看到的新闻、不同的信息，其实它完全颠覆了我们以往的一种对未来的一种期待。在我看来，我觉得未来在一瞬间到来了。这个新的作品筹备了有很久，1年多的时间，但是恰恰在准备的时间就赶上新冠肺炎的疫情。这件事其实把这件作品也做了一个升级，所以我觉得"祸"这样一个标题也强烈的一种暗示，关于我们怎么样去面对现实，面对新的处境和新的变化。其实我一直觉得，可能如果有一个机会去重新和刘嘉玲去合作一个片子，应该是怎样的？我觉得它一定应该是有联系的，它可以去连贯起我和它之间的关联，同时也连贯起城市发展变化。当时做 Always I Trust 这件作品，其实它的思路的来源是我收到的一封垃圾邮件。然后新的这个故事，我从一个接收变成了一个我去给予。这个片子以这样的一个角度去连接和6年前这件作品作为一个呼应。在最初我们探讨的是，我们接收信息，接收大量的无用的信息，这些信息可能会被人们抛弃，会被人们忽略，但我希望去通过重新去解读这封信，去带来我们对城市的反思。我更多的不会把自己设定成一个艺术家，或者是一种艺术家的生活方式。我没有创作时间，我也没有思考时间，我更多的是可能喜欢去跟猫在一起，它给我带来平静。从最开始的一只猫马丁，然后到现在有20几只猫，我觉得猫的性格越来越影响到我，就是不要太在乎其他人的想法，保持自我，就永远保持一种骄傲、孤独这种状态。就是脸臭臭的，我觉得大家还是会喜欢你的。
I don't know how well everyone could see that, but that's such a great line around you know, enjoy your solitude and be happy, and you may look grumpy, but everyone will still love you anyway. It's a good message. So it was a real shame that Chen Rang wasn't able to, you know, participate today. So we just wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity to hear it from the artist in his own voice. And I will just talk a little bit about, well, just briefly talk about VIVE Arts and our role with the project, and then go into doing a bit more of a kind of introduction into Chen Rang as the artist, his practice, and the work. So before I go into, just see if this is working.
Just a couple times.
Couple of times. Keep going. Yeah, I'm going to show some clips from the VR work.
Hello, Qing Ling. Hi, Vivian. Hello, RNYE. Good evening, Paulo. Good afternoon, Rachel. Good evening, Wittero. Hello, Yogi Bruno. Hello, Mirella Bornak. Hello, Six Isaac. Greetings, Norman Walter.
Okay. Oh, going straight to. Yeah, I think that's right. Well, go back to the V&A, all roads lead. So VIVE Arts, forgot to put that at the beginning. So VIVE Arts is basically an art and technology program under HTC. So HTC, when it started making the virtual reality hardware in 2017, also wanted to start investing in art and culture, and also seeing how artists would be potentially using these tools in their practice. So over the past 6 years, we've worked with lots of different artists, often for the first time, in using VR as a kind of tool for, you know, artistic experimentation, and also with cultural institutions on new forms of storytelling around their exhibitions and new ways of engaging audiences. And the way that we work really varies. It's you know, can be around the commissioning of the work, co-producing, but also sort of supporting with advice around the facilitation, connecting them with developers who will actually build the experience itself, and bring that creative vision to life. So we work in lots of different ways, and also, and I will go into this a little bit more maybe when we have our discussion, but about thinking about the kind of afterlife of this work, because I think one thing that we know with immersive technology, and by that I'm also talking very much about virtual reality, mixed reality, sort of often headset-based work that is made in game engines also. So that's one thing to mention about immersive technology, is most of the virtual reality experiences will start in game engines. I'll come back to that a little bit later on. But I think that we're also thinking about where this work can go after it's presented initially. So really helping to support the distribution and the touring and kind of the afterlife of the projects. So I'm going to enough on VIVE Arts and talk a little while. I'll just show you a few of the kind of clips. So we did a collaboration with the V&A back in 2020, which was all part of the Alice in Wonderland exhibition. So we worked with the V&A closely on creating a VR experience that was part of the exhibition, and was a very fun and playful way of, you know, being able to engage with some of those themes, particularly around scale, and that was wonderful to contextualize it also alongside the original objects, the 10-year drawings. And so this was something that we developed with the V&A, and then ultimately then toured actually separately as a sort of VR experience. We also worked with the Tate Modern on Modigliani retrospective and survey. And this was a recreation of Modigliani's studio, where you could kind of step into the experience, step into the studio and experience what it was like. We worked with the Louvre on experience around Mona Lisa, and then with artists. So again, sort of we've often worked with the artists on their first kind of VR projects. So this was Saigo Chang on Sleepwalking in the Forbidden City for the Palace Museum in Beijing. We've worked twice with Dominique Gonzalez Forster. This was from her exhibition at the Serpentine last year, Alienarium, and she created this beautiful VR experience, which was also multiplayer. So you embodied an extraterrestrial being and then kind of interacted with the other participants in the experience. And this was from last year. This is commissioned Wood Sang, performance artist, filmmaker. She was invited by Cecilia Alemani to present her special project at Milk of Dreams at the Venice Biennale, which was a part of her ongoing project Reimagining Moby Dick. And this was from a kind of using the technology as a form of non-linear, sort of non-human perspective of the whale. And we've also done some projects which are more around NFTs and Web3. So this was a collaboration with the Mooka Foundation. I'm just going to cycle through it, and with Christiana Williams last year. And finally, I can't remember what I came to after this. Yes, and then we're also doing quite a lot with location-based experiences as well. So this was a project by Blanca Lee, which we supported to bring to Taipei. It was originally kind of shown in Europe. And I'm going to go through now, actually a bit more about Chen Rang, get to the artist and the work itself. And I'm not as good as memory as you, so I want to kind of just make sure I kind of represent him in his own, in the language. So Chen Rang was born in Mongolia and now lives and works in Hangzhou. And he participated in an artist residence program at the Royal Academy of Visual Arts in the Netherlands from 2013 to 2014. So he really identifies as representative of China's new generation of video artists and cross-media artists, really known for his cross-disciplinary practice across poetry and film and installation and video art. And his works got some of the just images here, and Helen will be able to talk more in detail about this, really draw widely from both Western and Chinese literature, cinema and visual culture, and his works really explore the existential state of Chinese youth in the face of political and cultural globalization, often reflecting his deep thoughts on universal themes such as boundary, distinction, and confrontation. So his practice often takes an experimental approach, from 9-hour film to breaking the habits of viewing exhibitions to incorporating physical performance in the work. And he founded the art space Martin Goya Business in 2017. This is an arts organization and community that supports over 400 emerging Chinese artists, musicians and creators in different fields. And of Martin Goya, Chen Rang says, "I like to call it a company or a business. I don't think it's a business, but it's a kind of like the way there are many things called art, but I don't think they really are art." And Chen Rang's work has been shown in numerous biennials, solo and group exhibitions and film festivals, including the New Museum, Van Gogh Museum, Sydney Opera House, Shenzhen Sculpture Biennial, and Art Institute of Chicago. And his work is in the collection of M+, DSL Collection, which we'll hear about from Helen, Shanghai Museum of Art, and the Royal Academy of Visual Arts in the Netherlands. So I want to talk now a little bit about Or As I Distrust, the work that's on view downstairs in the project space. And this was a work that was created actually in 2020, was commissioned in 2020 between VIVE Arts and the K11 Foundation. So it's a really interesting organisation that is an art foundation, but also has a number of, malls, and really looking at that kind of art and commerce. And Chen Rang had previously created the video work Or As I Trust. So then came up with the idea of doing the VR experience, and it's a sort of multi-part experience actually. It's the VR work, a video installation, which you'll also see downstairs in the sculpture. So this was co-commissioned for the X Museum, and then it went on to a number of different of the Vietnamese X Museum in Hong Kong, and then also in Shanghai. So we've got these different kind of versions here. And I want to show you some of the content from the VR experience itself. And the idea with it really is like looking at that kind of very abstract tactile spaces. How do you use that technology of being able to kind of step into these worlds, these interconnected portals, quite liquid tactile spaces? And it really resonates also, I think, around that idea of loneliness, and extending his work around the connection between sort of urban isolation and what it feels like to sort of be in the city. So he's looking at that through these kind of different spaces and environments. And as he mentioned in the video, the concept of it is really this: you're hearing from the perspective of this unattended to email account that's sort of sending out these missives of different, like a massive list of recipients. So it's quite a sort of this voice echoing through the chambers of these sort of abstract spaces. And the work, as I say, is also the second part of it is the video installation, which he collaborated with the Chinese filmmaker actor Karina Lau. And the work was made during the pandemic. You really get that sense of the sort of the isolation and sort of loneliness a little bit that we all felt at that time. So it's really, really beautiful and kind of interesting to give you this very different perspective. There's elements of the VR experience that come into the video installation as well. So I think it's already been shown. Tina showed a few of these, but some installation shots. So I want you to definitely welcome to go down to see it, and it's on view until the 8th of July. And then finally, and this is the sort of VR experience here. So it's a sort of 8-minute experience. Oh, go back. I just wanted to get a quick quote from the artist, which about always I distrust. If urban construction is done by thousands of unknown workers, then the construction of the information city should include these virtual builders. As rapid urban development brings unprecedented technological changes, the relationship between cities and people has evolved accordingly, and this relationship now stands at a new crossroad over a new horizon. So,
Thank you.
finish that.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. As I said, we have this work downstairs. So I was so excited to do it together with VIVE Arts. Maybe later we could a little bit hear more about, again, as you said, like a broader context, so maybe the preservation of artworks and different views on that. So that'd be great. But now we're moving on to the DSL Collection. Helen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And again, I'm sorry that Sylvain couldn't make it this evening. So I'm a poor replacement. I'll try and do him justice. So I'll give you a quick background on the collection. So DSL Collection was founded by Dominic and Sylvain Levy. And first and foremost, it is a family collection. They started collecting over 40 years ago. You know, they collected modern art, abstract expressionist, design, and DSL Collection itself was started in 2005 after their first visit to Shanghai. They fell in love with the energy and vibrancy of the Chinese art scene at the time, and it was completely new for them. So they started talking to artists, going to studio visits, speaking to curators, galleries, and that's how it all started. And at the moment, we have approximately 350 works in the collection, and it keeps changing because the idea is to keep it very timely and to be also timeless. So that's their concept. And how we work with technology is that Sylvain and Dominique were very keen to share the collection and to share sort of their excitement for what they discovered in China. At the time, the West wasn't that familiar with a lot of artists. We knew all the ones that were getting these auction records, but artists like Chen Wen wasn't very known. So we obviously we loaned works in touring exhibitions, but technology was a key tool to sharing it. And later on, I would sort of show you a timeline of where we sort of went from 2005. So as I said, a big concept is to be timely, and we are always keen to support emerging artists. So the collection has changed a lot since 2005. And as this is just sort of, you can see the evolution, I suppose, of their collecting habits. So in 1988, this is what they had, and this is what we have at the moment. They have started collecting beyond Chinese contemporary art. They've been sort of collecting a lot of collaborative works, Virgil Abloh. So that's sort of what we have now. And the philosophy behind Sylvain and Dominique's collecting is the idea of the Wunderkammer, the cabinet of curiosities. Sorry, can you? Yeah. And the idea is that they want to live with the art. They want to experience it. They want to, really enjoy art. So it's not on a pedestal. They live with the art. And this is a photo of their dining room in Paris. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, they've sort of moved beyond just Chinese contemporary art. And it's not about sort of hoarding objects either. It's everything, it's used and, loved. So that's just a very quick overview of the collection and the collectors. Now, going to Chen Ren, we're very lucky to have 4 works from the sort of early development of Chen Ren's career. they first met Chen Rang through Liu Shu, who's a big gallerist now, and they went to Chen Rang's studio, and they were amazed at his skills, first of all, and the fact that he is not purely a Chinese artist. He's very sort of contemporary and very global in his approach. So we have forwards, and they're all sort of from the early period, so 10 years ago, 2011, 2012. That's another one from 2010. And then I will show you the last work that we collected, which is which was also projected onto the facade of the Palais Tokyo in 2015. this video is quite interesting. It's called Joss, and Joss is actually linked with Chinese culture. It's these ceremonial papers that we burn for sort of our departed loved ones, and the idea is to burn it so that they can have whatever you're burning in the afterlife. And in this video, he's used this concept, and it ties in with the idea of consumerism, because as the video progresses, you see, Chanel bags being burnt, and that's his sort of the artist's way of sort of talking about society and our values. So I hope we can somehow make this work. So going back to the idea of them wanting to share the collection. So from the very beginning, like I said, we did a lot of touring exhibitions, and these are just a number of the institutions that we worked with. So as you can see, we loaned works to Singapore, to Krakow, Sheffield, not so long ago, and in more recent years, we have relied on technology. And as you can see, we were the first museum to be on Second Life back in 2009, when nobody had really thought about, anything virtual. We were the first private collection to have an iPad app. Obviously, that's very obsolete now. We have a private, the VR museum, which is on its third sort of iteration. And so now, and where we are is working with artificial intelligence, NFT, and something that's sort of more, I guess, Jake's practice. So that's just a very quick run through of DSL Collection.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. So there are so many points to unpack here, but I would like to start from, so digital art has quite a long history actually, and it's developing so fast. And I think what's great about your work, Jake, is that you bring attention to the ethics behind this specific technology that you work with. And I was wondering if you see it changed, or maybe your work showing with the large museum helped to change it, or what was your view on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I realised that I was speaking a lot about the Victoria and Albert installation, which isn't in the space that we're in, and of course there's also my work all around us right now. But yeah, I think definitely around the drag, actually, around thinking about how do we bring queer bodies in institutions and do that in a sensitive way. So for me, making sure that everyone is credited, and kind of the labour is seen in a way, and kind of, I don't know, being very honest about how this tech is working, the process that went into it, and why we've kind of made the decisions we've made, but also being able to just enjoy it on a more surface level and hopefully make some really playful, engaging work. But it does have this kind of often more philosophical and ethical side to it. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the works actually are, the sort of more recent works anyway, are thinking about the ethics of how we use this technology. I think in the earlier days when I first started using AI, so I've been using AI for 7 years now, so before it became kind of the hype that it is now, and I think back then I was more interested in the sort of metaphysical questions around it, and then I realised that the focus should really be on kind of more the ethics, who's building these systems and who are they building them for. So yeah, but definitely thinking about queer bodies into institutions, what's it mean to bring a drag performer into a gallery space like this? It was quite an interesting one in a way as an experiment. Because I don't want that person to feel somehow objectified, like they're kind of here as an art object. We have to do it in a sort of sensitive way as well. So yeah, we've kind of been trying to think of ways of doing that to make sure that everyone feels very comfortable in the spaces they're in and paid properly, and we've kind of got the right audience as well. I guess it's a two-way thing.
Definitely.
I think what's amazing is being able to expose the process as well, the process of the work, and that's really evident and amazing. You'll all see it in the installation, Jake's installation. There is really demystifying what are these AI tools? How are they being used? What are the data sets? And as you say, kind of really thinking about how we can think about those tools in a more kind of inclusive way and more representative way. And I think that artists using tools have always had that long history of thinking critically and being able to provide critique and being able to provide, push the boundaries and sort of expose, different elements. And so I think that kind of continues today.
And for us, there's listening to you talk about the ethics of AI. There are such clear parallels about the ethics of cultural practice more broadly. So the ethics of photography, there's always been a power dynamic between who's making a photograph and who's being photographed, and then what happens and consent and what happens with an image after it's made, and it's a long established thing thinking about the ethics of photography. Similarly, demystifying the process, the work that the Zizi show, it's getting at these age-old questions of truth and authenticity and originality in images, and those are conversations that we've been having in a very accessible way through photography because of the immediacy of a photographic image. But actually, there's still a lot of kind of quote unquote demystification to do as well when you think about camera technology and how photographs are made and how we move from photographs being a product of light to photographs being a computational image, and the transparency of that shift. When people take a photograph on their phones, it's okay because it feels like the camera lens looks like a lens of cameras past, and it feels like you're making a photo. It's a computational image stitched together from multiple images it's a device with image capture capability, but because it looks like a camera and feels like a camera, it's much more experienced in that way. So I think bringing work like Jake's into the photography centre also really plays into this conversation about not only demystifying AI and that kind of that type of technology and machine learning process, but also kind of dismantling this binary between this is analog and this is digital and whatever that carries with it, because it's been much more fluid for much longer than I think we've talked about very openly.
The early media artists and photographers that got their hands on these techniques and tools were always trying to find ways of hacking it and glitching it and finding ways of making it break down and finding poetry in those failures as well.
It's like John Whitney, who is one of the pioneers of computer animation. Motion graphics had basically made this mechanical camera out of a gun director, I think, and because he was the original, he created the animation at the beginning of Vertigo, the film, and it was and even before that you've got op art, don't you, with Bridget Riley and how that led into it, and then in fact even being next to this work, makes me also think of Jodie and net artists who are doing amazing browser-based work, and I just think that kind of being able to kind of look at the maddening relationship we often have with technology, and they really kind of led into that in a very playful way,
and Cheng Ran's before there was a work which was about the Man Ray's tears. That's one of the most famous photographs from the 1930s. So there's all of this interplay. There's all of this interplay between these different ways of thinking and making and producing creative and cultural practice.
What about preservation? We're really curious about this one because the technology evolves so fast, and for museum or private collection or in terms of production, it's great. But then I'm sure you look forward to years to come to preserve the work. Do you find it challenging, or how do you see it, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, my colleagues in the digital design, digital art curators are really spearheading that work. But it's, as the photography section, we make a number of digital acquisitions, and I actually should have mentioned that we are in the process of acquiring Jake's work for the permanent collection at the museum, which we're really delighted about. We're thinking about we have sometimes quite different considerations. We don't often think about things like software. But actually, in terms of preservation, it's really just about policy. It's about flexibility and clear policy. So thinking about how you future-proof things. As a national institution, our collections are also publicly accessible, whether they are in the gallery or not. So we're thinking about how we can make something accessible to a visitor when it's not on view. If that's a print or a photograph or a painting, they make an appointment to the prints and drawing study room and we pull it out the stores for them. If that's something digital, we need to talk to artists about whether they're happy for their work to be shown on a desktop screen in the study room if someone would like to see it when it's not on view. We're thinking about how we could discuss permissions to change file types in the future so that we have the freedom to update things so we can look after them safely rather than have them be inaccessible. We're thinking about, if we loan things, we as an institution, similarly to you, we're really keen to loan our collections and share them with other places. We can't guarantee that somewhere that's going to loan a digital object, especially one that we've commissioned, is going to have the same infrastructural setup that we do. We're acquiring, with the ZZ show, we're acquiring the moving image files, not the LED screens or any of the hardware that you saw. So I think it's about preservation, both in obviously there's also conservation from, depending on what kind of object it is, there are different people who are specialised in conservation in that sense. But when we're thinking about preservation, we're thinking, yes, about keeping the object accessible and stable and safe, but we're also thinking about future-proofing it from an access perspective, and keeping it open for loans and other ways that we might share it.
Interesting. And I'm wondering about the private collection in the sense, because also I know that you guys started to look at digital art so early on.
Yes.
Which is really
very early on. When they first started collecting video art, they were given videotapes, Betamax, that I think a lot of people don't even know about. And then it became CDs. And then now, certain point it became a USB stick. And then, I don't know, maybe in a few years' time it's just an NFT. But then I think it goes back to what Catherine was saying about the hardware. Yes, we get the image files, but how you play it, how you present it, it's going to be different. And is that what the artist would want? So that's definitely a question. And I think in terms of how we preserve things, I think we just have to adapt. As technology develops, there'll be challenges as well as, opportunities. And, I think it's just a matter of being quite flexible. And I think that's the difference between a private collection and an institution. We have a lot more freedom, and we can talk directly with the artist. It's a much more fluid relationship, I think, and not having to go through, different teams and getting permissions. And it's just a little bit more sort of simpler, I think, for collection.
And
sorry,
yes, I was just curious, because you commission so many wonderful works with different artists around the world. What happens next? Like, where do the works go, and how do you think about this? I know you have the whole structure for it, but if you could...
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to quickly respond to the point that Helen was making, because actually I think an interesting thing about Chen Rang's work is that we had to port it, because it was originally presented on Focus Plus, which is an old headset. And so we had to port it for Focus 3. So it's like, I think it also becomes, with having this conversation with a particular upcoming project, which is around, how do you, when you're developing the work, how do you build in that kind of future-proofing? How do you build in that kind of, what's the intention about how it should be presented in future? I used to think, I used to be at Museum of the Moving Image, which was one of the first institutions to collect video arcade games. And I think there was like one technician in the whole of the States who had all of the bits and pieces in this treasure trove of bits. And it's sort of at a certain point, that question of emulation is a really interesting one. What's the intention for it? Because technology is going to develop, and particularly in the context of using tools like AI, who knows what, cloud computing, some of those service providers they're only thinking about the next sort of 10 years. So it's really interesting when you're looking at more durational works as well, how do you continue to sort of adapt that? But I think, being very kind of clear from the outset around the sort of intention for the work artistically, and the thinking around the presentation of it and how it's to be shared. So to go back to the commissioning question, it happens in lots of different ways, the way we work. So it might be that an artist comes to us with an idea, or we're talking to an artist, or comes from a developer sometimes. The artist has a relationship with, because we all work has to be built, as I've mentioned, in one of two game engines usually, Unity or Unreal. And so it's sort of, we don't have the technical within VIVE Arts to develop those. We always engage an external developer. And so then when we're doing that, we're also, I think one of the interesting qualities about developing working game engines is that it's a world building tool, you know, and you can really develop that in a more iterative way, because it can be presented as an installation, it can be presented as a VR experience. And so to go back to Wood Sang's work, that was developed by Studio Albion, and it was presented at the Venice Biennale in as beautiful. Thank you. Are you doing that? Magically going backwards. In the Giogande, which is like this incredible 14th century shipping yards in the Arsenale, and it was this incredible quality of the reflection of the water. Obviously, it's the sort of the idea of the ocean as a kind of cosmos. And it was a beautiful meditative piece that ran for on this 16-meter screen for 6 hours. So you really saw the change in lights there. You know, I went to see it. I was so lucky to be able to see it at sunset. That we then iterated that into a VR experience, which was 15 minutes, and you had these sort of vignettes that were taken from the real-time installation. The work has gone on now, and it's now, I think it's in the lobby of SF MoMA, it went to Gropius Bow, it's gone, to lots of places. But I think that idea of the opportunity around different kinds of contexts for work, and the concept of art as a evolving, I think you've mentioned this, Jake, the idea of art as an evolving organism, as an art can evolutionary, that it can continue to iterate and develop and grow in different forms, and it doesn't have to be fixed. I think that's what's really exciting about working with these digital tools.
Definitely. We also think that collaboration is a huge part of it as well, just collaborating with different artists, institutions, and for you it's specifically important. I also thought you could say something about this, Jake.
Yeah, well, I feel like on the preservation and conservation side, that was, I don't know, I feel like VR is a really difficult one to do, but actually 5 years ago, AI was so messy. I literally had to build this computer, and it took me kind of months of breaking it and then getting it to work again. Like in the early days where these early engineering papers were coming out, just to get the code to run, I had to install about 5,000 libraries, and each one was so dependent on the last one. If anything broke, the whole thing would fall apart. So quite early on, I made the decision I'm going to work mostly actually as a video artist. Yeah. I'm going to create video output from this because it's so hard to get that code to run. But also nothing was really being added to it because I don't work really with interactive work. My work doesn't generally have to be real time. Maybe with one or two exceptions. This is one of them. We're trying to do stuff on stage at the moment that we kind of want to run real time. But actually, a lot of the time, it doesn't make much of a difference. Because if no one's interacting with it, there's no reason why it can't just be a fixed video piece. So that's in a way my decision as an artist, actually doesn't change the piece conceptually to do that. And that, if it was kind of running real time but not interactive, then what does that even mean? Because that, time would be a conceit in the AI anyway that I would be giving it. So yeah, I kind of decided to work in a much more tried and tested world of video art, where the V&A can collect video files rather than a computer that may well break down in 2 months' time. I decided that was much safer. But yeah, VR is a hard one as well because there are so many dependencies and bits of code.
And often it actually comes around that it's like the game engine. It's rather than the headset. It's more about what was it built in, and then that has then moved on to the exact
version of that game engine, and then the exact computer that would have run that in 2018.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think it's important. That's the role of public institutions as well in thinking about the public good and the sort of being able to have those infrastructures to support the development of the work and thinking about preservation as part of that, because it's important to be factoring that in from the outset, really. Yeah.
It's sometimes what matters to the artist in a way. So there's the whole conversation with Harold Cohen, I guess, who's here as well. It's how much of that code matters to Harold Cohen, or was it kind of just the output, the concept of it, or is it actually important that that particular code written in that particular programming language, working on that particular computer, at what point is it?
Yeah, it was also interesting that he decided not to use the robot after his death, right? So that's another thing, the collaboration with technology, how far it goes, and all of these things. Yeah.
I think actually, and also going back to certain industries will be more conscious in thinking about preservation issues than others. So obviously cultural institutions are really thinking about that around art. But I think, in the context of, for example, the video game industry, that was really, I used to work at the V&A, I worked on an exhibition on video games, and it was really interesting in the process of working with the curator and like trying to access games from AAA studios that are just not thinking about retaining the kind of materials about the development of a particular game, because it's always on to the next title. And so that idea of like legacy and heritage, the film industry does now. Like I think the film industry does sort of document that in a different way, but it's sort of video games is not quite caught up. I think indie game designers often are doing that, because maybe they're, but yeah, it's sort of fascinating really.
It feels like, especially as a national institution, you're always balancing balancing how you collect things with respect to the artist's view and maintaining the integrity of an object. But sometimes there can be 10 different kind of ground zeros from where you're working. Sometimes it's not so clear what is the kind of master version of something or the quote-unquote original version of something. So trying to balance those questions with the reality that we collect in perpetuity, we collection build, we do not deaccession. It's an interesting question, and one that we need to be very attuned to, especially when it comes to things like hardware, because otherwise those parts of the collection become completely inaccessible if we haven't thought about it.
How does that work for the DSL collection? Do artists sometimes come back and say, I've got, a new iteration of a work, and is that collected, as a separate edition?
I think that was a key thing. We can happily deaccession anytime.
Yeah.
And I think what is quite unique about DSL collection is that we do keep it very lean. That's why there's always a maximum of about 350 works. And we do sort of, as artists develop, we might go back to them and say, do you want to sort of swap works, really? Sort of, we will take a newer edition of the work, or, whatever sort of new projects they might be working on. So that's what we do. And a lot of the times, we might sort of because the key thing about DSL is that we want to support young artists, the new generation. So we will, go back to galleries even and say, well, if there is a new artist that you would like to promote, we're happy to consider it, and then we can swap it out for, something that's been in the collection, since the beginning. And so, I think that, again, it's that flexibility that comes with being a private collection, that we can, and it's not actually so much deaccessioning, it's just taking it out from the formal DSL collection. Sylvain and Dominique might still keep it, but it's not under the sort of title of DSL collection, and it's not necessarily featured in the book, but it's still, we still keep it. So I think the idea is to always be regenerating with the collection, and they like to sort of, the analogy is a bonsai tree. They want to keep it very lean and to keep shaping it, and that's where sort of the idea of developing a sort of timeless cultural brand for the collection.
That's super interesting. Okay, I think we should maybe open to the Q&A if someone has any questions. I think we have a microphone somewhere. I can do that, definitely. If someone has any questions. Otherwise, I have one last one if no one wants to go for it. Or...
Well, I got a thought rather than a question, so let's say art is a way of freedom of expression, right? So we do have art, therefore we can freely express ourselves. Will we agree with that? Yeah, okay, good. And it seems, for what I've heard, that digital art involves more and more complex digital infrastructure, such as CPUs, GPUs to do DSPs, as well with higher and higher computing requirements. So then eventually it could be that access to those resources perhaps not be affordable for everybody. So perhaps we are limiting that digital art to the hands of the few who can afford it. Yeah. So I think that perhaps may be a risk to consider as well, because, well, as we get more and more into digital, that requires more and more computing power. Yeah. So that's something as well, perhaps, that not as sure if it is being considered within the art world. The other consideration as well, it is that as we agree that art is a way of freedom of expression as well, there are, and it requires more and more that computing power and CPU and all of that. There is an act that it is the CHIPS Act that the US is trying to enforce with China, for example, just to avoid China to invading Taiwan, which Taiwan is actually the, I'm not getting here into politics here, but Taiwan is the main source of chips for the world, yeah. So I was just interested if that digital art and digital artists, they have considered as well the repercussions of that into the art world, yeah, in terms of perhaps limiting the freedom of expression in China because lack of availability of chips, or if China invades Taiwan, the limiting of freedom of the entire world, because well, we will not have perhaps enough chips available as well to represent what we would like to express via digital art as well. And the last consideration is as well, as digital art requires more and more electronics, what will be the sustainability requirements for those? How we can recycle those components in order to enable and support the next generations to play with the same tools. Yeah. I see that art is just becoming more and more complex, where perhaps 10 years ago it was easier to develop or to express feelings, and now just becoming perhaps more complex and more unaffordable on different angles. Yeah. So this is just my thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a few parts to that question. I think just correct me. Does anyone want to take it, or should I address it to someone? So I think the question was about.
I was just the first part was quite kind of discreet, and I think just speaking about the idea of access to materials. You know, the idea of the democratization of the arts is a really problematic one. And the frameworks within which we've understood what that means have changed over the years. So I think absolutely access to materials that recall, you know, in the broad sense of the word, materials that are expensive, that are you know, sometimes complex to understand, to operate. That's certainly not a new issue, but one that is absolutely magnified by digital technologies. And I think that with respect to that, it's very important to have organisations like yours and collections like DSL, where the whole premise of those places is to support artists, it's to financially support them, whether that's whether that's in production or whether that's in connecting them to others who will facilitate those processes, or whether it's museums commissioning to put artists into a wider platform. I think for me that's just a really important piece of the kind of access question. Of course, you touched upon the question of sustainability, which is something we haven't talked about at all today. It is a different.
Yeah, but no, I know that's a major issue. Like funding and distribution in immersive as well. It's like the biggest issues, and the work is expensive to make. Yeah. There's a lot of it's also about skills gap. There's a deficit in like the talent development pipeline, and a lot of university courses that are teaching about the development skills. They often go directly into AAA companies, where they're getting probably paid a lot more than they put in the arts necessarily. So I think the more that there can be infrastructural support and funding into this space, from whatever means, and there's in the UK, there's actually a lot of money that's coming via research funding via AHRC. And there's going to be these big pots of money that are coming out, which will, I think, hopefully really stimulate growth. There's one that's just been announced recently, X-Artists, which is also, I think, smaller pots of money, prototype funding, and then production funding, then follow-on funding. So, being able to sort of see that more incremental growth. But I do think, it's a space that's also challenging, but also the distribution aspect in terms of being able to share the work and see the work.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have questions? No? Yep.
I had the questions about climate advocacy because I attended the training recently on carbon literacy, and I was really shocked to find out that to send an email caused about 4 grams of carbon emissions, and to upload a selfie would cause as much as, I think, using a paper. So, but I think that question has just been addressed, which is great. And then another question in mind is about the hype topic now of AI, that everyone is getting their hands onto, like how to get the right prompts to use AI to do certain things. So I guess my next question would be revolving around this latest medium that the artist could use, which is very, very exciting. And I wonder, what are your thoughts on seeing digital art that's made with AI in general?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that. So yeah, I guess in terms of that second part of the question, I mean, the first part of the question, of course, yeah, we need to be looking at the environmental issues of all of these things. I think for me, one of the big ones was with NFTs, which actually made me kind of take a bit of a step back and decide I didn't really want to go too deep into the NFT world because I was quite concerned about the implications of, yeah, quite how environmental they were. But I did a couple, but only in projects I thought were really interesting, trying to tackle some of those issues. In terms of the AI side, I think, yeah, it has been a bit bizarre as someone who's been using these technologies for a while to like see just the explosion which has happened. And, actually since the V&A commissioned the piece as well. So, it was interesting that kind of it opened as there was a huge explosion in these technologies and these tools. I think, 99% of what I see I'm not that excited by. They can make extraordinary images, these things, but I really would love to see more artists kind of critically engaging with what this technology is doing and really thinking about the data set. I mean, the thing about, these large diffusion models, just these large language models as well, we are beholden to big tech companies. So they're pre-trained data sets on millions and millions of images. And actually, the way that I like to work with AI, and still like to work with AI, and actually I'm kind of avoiding slightly using some of these new tools, is actually really sinking my teeth into the kind of layers underneath of like the data set and how to train the model and how the tech's actually working. So where I find it much less creative collaborating with these later tools, you get a much more impressive effect. But yeah, I'd like to see more artists really kind of subverting this technology, or like thinking about the fact that it is a snapshot of the internet at a particular point in time, with kind of the biases that come with that, gathered by certain people. And it's like a frozen moment in time, which is quite an interesting point. So I think there's a lot of things discussed there. It's a couple. There was someone who was using, I think, DALL-E to make Republicans or Mid-Journey. Republicans, that was very funny, turning Republican politicians into RuPaul Drag Race drag queens. That one made me laugh a lot. But yeah, more things like that, I think. But it is also massively democratizing. I mean, it is exciting. And I think there are positives in a way, is that, I feel that some of the conversations I was having around AI a couple of years ago were actually starting to get really quite tedious to me. The same conversations coming up again and again, and often slightly misleading conversations around kind of, consciousness and philosophy of mind, where actually I felt like it never really got anywhere. And I feel there are different metaphors we can use when talking about AI, actually more helpful ones. That actually now I feel that the conversations become more nuanced because people are more engaging with these tools and how they're working and the policy around it. Yeah, I don't know if you...
We opened the Photography Centre, I think it was the week after they had the Sony Photography Awards, where I don't know how familiar everyone is, but they announced a winner of one of the prizes, and then afterwards he said it was an AI-generated, it was a computer-generated image, and it caused a lot of conversation. And I think you're absolutely right in people engaging with the idea of it, with it being in media, mainstream media. I think people are coming with an understanding of what we're talking about, but also how it touches their lives and how it might touch their lives in the future. So there's a basis for engagement in the gallery in a way that I don't think existed before. I mean, from a photography tradition, photography has died so many times, it's hard to keep track. And to me, AI is another development in digital technologies. It's not so different to a lot of the developments that happened before. Photoshop or digital manipulation, when it first came about, caused similar conversations. You can draw parallels between the advent of photography in the 1840s and the 1830s and 40s when people were saying that it was, it was responsible for the death of painting. So, these conversations feel like they've been being had in different ways for a really long time. For me, the difficulty about the conversations, similarly to, as Jake said, around AI that focus on this kind of absence of human intervention, is that for me, the human intervention is still such an important part of it. It's only as good as the input it's getting. And even if that input becomes automated at some point, it's working against, it's working at every aspect. Some part of every aspect is human-led. And humans have also, the fact that an AI-generated image won the Sony Awards would have been completely uninteresting if there wasn't a human who reacted to that in a particular way. So I think it's important to remember the kind of level of human input with these things, even as they become better and smarter and more automated.
It's an interesting one with AI, and I can't remember, there's lots of talks recently going on, obviously, exactly where, but this thing of like the fact that artificial intelligence is very close to, we get very concerned. We're not worried about the fact that a car can go faster than us. It's like, it's not going, there's humans behind all of these tools, they're just tools. Yeah. And, how they're used is problematic and wonderful in equal measure, it's sort of, it's like, Xerox machine was described as being like the death of painting as well. It's like, and NFTs. And I think what was interesting actually last year towards the end of last year in Web3 and NFTs is actually a lot of the hype started to fade, and there was a real critical discourse that was developing around that as a medium for distribution, provenance, it comes out of not necessarily like crypto whales, but also out of necessary activism, like new forms of governance, decentralized ways of cross-border collaboration. So, but then AI has kind of really taken up the hype cycle curve and sort of the discussion around that. But I think it's important to have a critical discourse around these tools and how people are using them and what's behind them, and art plays a fundamental role.
It almost feels like they're like little philosophical thought experiments, actually. I think it's actually a really good point that the same with NFTs. I'm not that interested in NFTs as they are, and I'm not that interested in a lot of these AI generative models, but actually it has sparked really good, I think, conversations for the large part. And I think actually a lot of this AI stuff, I'm not hugely interested in the art that's coming out of it. And some of those conversations I find a little bit complicated and frustrating. I don't know. I mean, there's definitely interesting conversations to be had there, but I think it has made much more interesting, nuanced conversations around the kind of power and policy and the kind of regulation of these tools. And
In relation to art as well, I think there's an assumption that everything digital is convenient and quick. Anything automated, and that's just not the case. Jake, as well as other artists like Anna Riddle, Liliana Faber, like they're building, these people are building their own data sets, and it's incredibly time consuming and incredibly laborious. And then you train a system on these data sets. It can take weeks to train a system to get it to where you want it to be. So I think that there's also a really interesting thing that's happening in artistic practice that's really, again, demystifying or dismantling these myths that digital things are quick and easy.
Thank you. That is a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for this. Thank you everyone for coming.